Hello Admirals and welcome back to my channel where I talk to you about the tabletop game Battlefleet Gothic set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. So this video is going to be a bit shorter than the others. We are literally talking about the end phase, the final phase of a player's turn when you're playing Battlefleet Gothic. So this is 4 out of 4. So in the end phase, typically Admirals will be doing a few things, mainly repairing your potential damage on your ships, doing teleport attacks, and resolving any of those pesky and brilliant boarding actions. So I'm just going to go into a little bit of detail on those and what that all means shortly. So in the end phase, when it's the player's turn, there are some critical kind of main sort of points that are part of it. So as I said, damage control, removal of blast markers, doing any teleport attacks, and boarding actions. So initially, if you've, I'll go into damage control in a little example in a second, but with blast markers, so when it's the player's turn, whoever's the player's turn, they will roll 1d6. So it's 1d6, you roll it, okay. And then that number is the number of blast markers that are not attached to ships that you can remove. So in this instance, I've got 2 blast markers that are out floating in the void that I can remove. If there were more, up to 5, I could remove that many. So that's one of the kind of, you do a bit of a tidy up the table, essentially, is kind of what you do. But you can't remove any that have that are still in base-to-base contact with your ships. They still represent the shields being sort of attacked and damaged in subsequent phases. But typically then in the next movement phase for the following player's turn, they will move their distance, and then these then will be available in that player's turn to potentially be removed. If you have more blast markers than the number you roll on the dice, you literally leave them there. That's basically it for the blast marker removal. Now, if you remember back to our previous video, our plucky little cruiser here for Chaos had actually had 4 points of damage caused on him, and this little ship was crippled. But it also had a critical hit caused on it. So if you remember back, when hits are caused, you may check to see if it's got a critical damage, and in this particular instance it did. If we remember back, we had an engine room damage. So this is the point in the end phase in which you will try and attempt to repair it. And how you repair it is the number of dice you will roll is the number of hit points you have left on your ship. And if you roll a 6 on any of those dice, you can then repair that ship. So usually a cruiser has 8 hit points, but we did 4 points of damage to this cruiser during our subsequent shooting and ordnance phase. So this little guy's got 4 hit points left, so we roll 4 dice. And then we will see if a 6 comes up. And fantastically, we have. Amazing. It's just like I planned. I didn't roll that. That's the first roll, actually, brilliantly, that I've actually rolled. But a 6 has rolled up, and that means that we repair that damage. Now, if you have multiple damage, critical hits on your ship, you need to roll multiple 6s. You can only repair 1 critical hit point of damage per 6 that you roll. So this is where hit and run attacks and assault boats can become quite devastating for ships, and tactically are very useful because you can do multiple critical hits to a ship and shut down the ship. So it may have engine room or port side damage, and so I would only be able to repair 1 of those, and so that system is still down. So it can really influence, and when you roll these, can really influence which one you want to put out or change or try and repair, I should say. So when you starting kind of building up these critical hits, it can be quite problematic for a ship, and it can really makes its functionality in the game reduce quite significantly. Now, I had our plucky township boarded here during the game. So during the game, during your movement phase, there's a particular order that you can do to essentially initiate a boarding action. And that is essentially moving your ship into base-to-base contact. Now I won't go into the all details about what boarding actions do, but there's a whole table in the book. But once it's into base-to-base, you would then complete the subsequent boarding action and the results associated with that in this end phase. And to be fair, the boarding action table can quite be onerous, and sometimes it can be quite confusing to kind of work out. But there's quite a lot to boarding actions, but they're really incredibly useful tactical aspects to the game. Really good for Space Marines, Chaos, Orcs. Not so good for our plucky little Tau friends here. They don't do too well in boarding actions, I'm afraid. So certainly something that I would highly recommend you look at as an action, but those sorts of actions get resolved in this phase. Now, teleport attacks are an interesting one. I'm going to be honest, I quite often forget to do teleport attacks. It's one of those weird they're really quite useful. They're actually very useful. What it does is completes a hit and run attack against your enemy. But the conditions in which to be able to achieve a teleport attack, I just end up forgetting. But essentially what you need to do to complete a teleport attack is ensure that your enemy ship that you're aiming for has had their shields removed, so they no longer have any shields, and that your ship is within 10 centimeters of the enemy ship you wish to complete a teleport attack against. So you would measure from stem to stem and see if it's within 10 centimeters, and if it is, you can then complete what is called a hit and run attack, which essentially allows you to roll and cause some potential extra critical hit on the enemy ship. But like I said, I quite often forget to do it, to be perfectly honest. But they are a very useful tactic to potentially use to get that one extra hit point of potential damage, or do that fundamental bit of critical damage to a ship to make them less viable and functional in the next turn when they're firing at you. So don't do me like me and forget about them, because they are quite useful. So I hope you enjoyed the video, Admirals. That's the end phase. There's 4 kind of critical points within the end phase. There is a little bit more, but they're the 4 critical ones, which is removing your blast markers, checking critical damage, and the important thing for that one as well is that it's both players get to roll off for the ships that they may have critical damage. It's not just whoever the person's turn is. Both players get to attempt to repair damage in that end phase. It's similar to Ordnance, where your opposing player can also move their Ordnance in the Ordnance phase as well. So that's it. The third thing is teleport attacks. Don't be like me and forget about them. They're incredibly useful. And the last one is boarding actions, which are a really good offensive tactic to take out ships. You can board with multiple ships at a time. Certain factions get big bonuses to boarding actions, like Orcs and Chaos, Khorne Chaos, and you can also put like sort of Terminators on Space Marine ships to improve the boarding actions and things like that. So there's a lot of viable tactics with that. It's a really good aspect to the game, and that's done all in the end phase. So I hope you enjoyed the video, Admirals. This is kind of the last one of the basic sort of videos of these 4 phases. Like I said, I'm going to go into orders in the next video, which are incredibly important. But until then, thank you very much, Admirals, and I'll see you soon.